Hello and welcome to Crafting Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I am your host. Every Wednesday and Friday, I am bringing you interviews with female and non-binary makers of all kinds from all over the world. Today's guest is Tamara Robertson. You may know her from Mythbusters, Mythbusters The Search, and Mythbusters Jr., along with all the amazing things she is doing on her own, like her very own science comic, and all the things she's involved in because of her immense passion for getting girls specifically more involved in science and technology. So it was a blast getting to talk with her and just learn her story, and also to just learn like maybe what it's like to be more in the spotlight than others of us who are not, or maybe if that's a path we look to going forward, kind of having an understanding of what we may need to consider before doing that. So really grateful to have Tamara on as a guest with me, and I know you're going to enjoy this interview. Before we hop on into the interview with her, though, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Annette of 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women in Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Workshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Spees, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Sven, Door Size Workshop, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Tool Mom Bonnie, ToolMomStore.com, Laura Oakley Soap Company, Mary Lou, Made by Mary Lou, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, The Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued and ongoing support, helping me to produce 2 episodes a week, every week. And with no further ado, here is Tamara.
For sure.
All right. Well, I do like to start by having my guests introduce themselves. So would you do that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Tamara Robertson. I'm a chemical and biomolecular engineer, but most people don't know me from my professional career. They know me from my TV one. So I've spent the last 4 years in people's living rooms via Discovery and Science Channel on Mythbusters, Mythbusters The Search, Mythbusters Jr., and probably my personal favorite, Scijinks, where I got to use science to break people.
Excellent. So before we get to like where you're at, I want to ask like, where'd you grow up and what kind of things were you interested in as a kid?
So I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. I'm the child of 2 Marines that met one night while standing duty together. Luckily, it was the time in history where, you know, they were allowed to date in grouping, because I know nowadays fraternization like that, especially since he was older, was not allowed or is not allowed. But so I grew up in Eastern North Carolina in a no stoplight town. Literally, if you blink, you miss us. And I grew up loving tinkering. You know, my dad was deployed most of my childhood, both like overseas during Desert Storm, and then he was stationed in Quantico. So he moved around while we stayed stationary. And so my favorite thing to do when dad was home was to follow him around in the garage. And so I became kind of his tool buddy. He would like tell me to go and get things and I would go grab them. And I always joke that the best tool to have in a shop is little hands, because that was the biggest tool that I would reach through things and he would hand me things and I would pull them back through. So I grew up, you know, rebuilding engines with him, rebuilding houses, just doing a lot of things that at the time I didn't really connect with, like engineering or STEM or anything like that. I didn't connect it with making. It was just me and dad in the shop. And I think one of the best things that my dad did for me was he never said that I was a girl in the shop. I was just someone in the shop with him. Which I wish the rest of my community echoed, but it did not. So I actually, I tell people I had to grow up a closet maker because I wasn't allowed to be who I was, in a lot of ways, not just with my building in my community. because it just, it's a debutante South. It wasn't acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I should have had long flowing curls and be putting on makeup and be walking down, all the stuff that I still cringe when I see little kids doing. But I think it's programmed in me
Mm-hmm.
to cringe. But it's something that as time grew, I kind of, put away, and it was something else. And I had a lot of troubles with the fact that, I was a huge tomboy. I always had a pixie cut. I literally had a pixie cut going into COVID. This is my COVID hair. It's what happens when I don't have a barber. But it was something that I got made fun of a lot for, and something that I ran away from fully, just to be able to try to have friends, which didn't actually work. My friends were my books, but I'm okay with that because I learned a lot. But it's one of those things that I've really enjoyed being able to embrace now, and find those young kids that were like me, that may not have friends, and show them now the joy of the internet, where they can connect with other people that have similar interests, and tell people in their hometown to,
Mm-hmm.
So it's been something that shaped my whole journey, but I've enjoyed trying to make sure it doesn't shape others.
Mm-hmm. And yes, I've seen the pixie cut. Much better with the pixie cut.
I miss it. It's so much easier, especially in a shop. Like
Yes.
I just throw this up all the time. But it's like one of those things that my barber, LA's just opening this week.
Mm-hmm.
So my barber may come back to her post soon, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So yeah, when you ran away from the no stoplight town, did you go straight to California?
No, actually, it's really weird. Like my goal was, I got to get out. I got to get out. The running like theory of our town is it's a black hole, and if you don't get far enough away, it just sucks you back in. And so I actually went to tech college first, and that was like a whole thing. Like I actually got a full appointment to the U.S. Air Force Academy. I got 4 out of 5 of the appointments you need. And then my childhood asthma bumped me 2 months before I was supposed to leave for the academy. So I was left like scrambling, because I was like, no, the black hole's getting me. And so I looked at and found a technical school nearby that had an associate's in science that I could sign up for. And I was still like, the military at the time was like, yeah, just get to 10 years, post anything with your asthma, and you can come in and we'll put you right back in the program. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to be a history major. I'm going to go into JAG. It's going to be great. I'm still going to be able to get out of this town. And so about 2 years into my college career, as a history major, I had, I think, 10 minors because I was so bored. And they were like, I had it in creative writing, I had it in biology, I had it, in all of these different, like math, all this stuff. And I had a teacher sit me down, and she's like, why are you not pursuing engineering? And I like kind of laughed at her. I was like, that's not something girls do, because I had never met an engineer in real life. The only engineer I knew was Scotty from Star Trek. And I'm like, this is just not something that that's real for me, And so she took me up to NC State, and I sat in a material science class. And for the first time, I felt challenged and engaged. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I went back and I researched, like, what's the highest paid engineering degree you can get and not have to go for an MS or PhD, because I knew I was self-funding, At the time, I was living in my car to be able to pay for school. So I was like, look, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this if it's more at a university, if it's more than just 2 more years. And so I transferred up to NC State, and go Wolfpack. And I started school there. And I still had this goal, like, I got to get out of North Carolina. And so my senior project was designing the entire downstream process for this vaccines company with a group, like not by myself, obviously, as a student. And I took this job in Louisiana for a really cool company. There's a chemistry that burns in air and explodes in water.
Oh, wow.
And it's really cool. What's weird is that it does that to form flame retardants. But it's like the coolest thing when they put it out in a garbage can and they lift it, it starts burning for no reason. And then they try to put it out with a fire hose and it starts exploding. I'm like the only person that stepped forward, and they're like, maybe you don't get to use this. I don't like, and so they did offer me a job. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get out. And then I graduated in 2009 in the middle of our recession. And so everyone's job offers were getting rescinded across the board. Like all of us were like, nope, it's no longer there. And so I was scrambling, but I had, again, designed this process for this company, and they were just building a vaccines facility in North Carolina. And so I came back, and I didn't tell them that the job offer was gone, because you never tell them that. And so I was like, I've really enjoyed working with the team. And if you would like to keep me, I could stay closer to my family this way, which was never the goal.
Right.
Never the goal to stay in that town. And so they're like, oh yeah, no, we'd love to. So of course we did the whole thing. And so I ended up staying in North Carolina for almost, I was in Raleigh, I think, for 10 years. And so I helped design and build the vaccines facility. I got sent abroad during swine flu pandemic to make vaccine for that. And then around that time, a company that I had interned with in South Carolina, who I loved, they came back and they said, hey, we're now allowed to hire, and we would love to hire you. And they came back a couple of times, and I kept saying, no, I'm not quite at that point, because I wanted to see the process all the way through validation. I wanted to learn everything I could. I wanted to make sure that we were manufacturing full time at our plant, because there's just something that's really amazing about watching something go from a P&ID design drawing to being a real life thing that you have to live with. Especially when you do some of the design and you're like, man, I should have put in more cabinets. But it was one of those things that eventually it got to the right time, and I moved to South Carolina. And then during that career path, I was doing a lot of traveling. I think I traveled 90% of the time. So it became really obvious that I didn't have to be there. And my partner at the time was in aerospace and really wanted to get back into that. But at that point, we were defunding all of the actual public programs, and everything was going privatized. So all of the aerospace that used to be in the South was closing their doors as far as the contract stuff. They just weren't getting them anymore, because NASA's we're not going to invest. Or more, not NASA, but the public said, we're not going to invest, right? And so luckily around that time was when, Elon and Richard Branson had both decided to invest and put things in California. And so I was like, well, I've been doing this acting thing for fun on the side as a creative hobby. Maybe if we end up there, I could do a little bit more of this. So my partner and I moved out to LA. First, I took a global position at a new company that I was like, can I live anywhere? And they're like, yeah, you can live anywhere. And so I was actually launching a global division for a Houston company for the first several years that I was in LA. And it was kind of one of those things that I ended up here, and I was like, yeah, this is great. But in my career, I had finally gotten to that top, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to turn around and pull up the next ladies. And there were no ladies for 3 tiers of management. And so in 2015, I was like, I'm going to leave this and I'm going to go into full-time outreach. And it was weird because I gave myself a year. I was like, I have a year to just do outreach, and then I got to figure out what I'm going to do as a grown-up. And almost a year to the day was when Mythbusters Search called and offered me the ability to come and be part of the 10 to compete. And then everything just changed from there. So the outreach is still 100% my normal job. And then I consult for engineering now to fill the void between shows. But it was a long little circular track, but it's one of those things that I love. I love the Southeast. I love the people there. I miss them. People here are they're not quite genuine and nice. I'll put it that way. I tell people all the time that, people in LA are measuring up a few things. They're trying to figure out, can you give me money? Can I make money off you? Or is there just a way to rise together and take your money along the way? They're there's not real friendships here.
Yeah.
And most people here are transient. It's a lot like the military town I grew up in. People come, they try to like make it,
Right.
not realizing that making it takes decades. And within 2 or 3 years they leave. So it's a very different place. I miss the Southeast a lot. I spend a lot of time going back to the Southeast.
Yeah. Hey makers. So today's podcast episode is sponsored in part by Alicia Van Osdal, who is the owner of Basil Blue Design Company. Alicia is a maker of all things, really. Her focus is on beautiful craftsmanship through woodworking, repurposing, refinishing, art, and sculpture. Her background includes 30 years of graphic design, logos, and branding. If you have an idea or concept and need a creative solution or graphic design, you can email Alicia directly at Alicia, and that is ALICIA @basilblue.com. Or you can visit her website at www.basilblue.com. And fun fact, Alicia actually designed the logo for Crafting Revolution. So that is an example of the impeccable work you can expect if that is something you are in the market for. So be sure to look up Alicia again at her website, basilblue.com. All right, let's get back into the action. My wife and I spent almost 5 years in Oceanside, California, which is a military town. But we were there for work, and we only went to LA and Hollywood area twice, and that was twice too many for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, so it's that whole genuine piece. And it was very much like your proximity to Hollywood does not make you important.
No. And what part of the Midwest though?
We live in Iowa, so it's like pretty much smack dab in the center of the country. Okay. Yeah, but it is just a different culture. Now, San Diego area, that, where we lived, like I loved, and it was still hard to get used to. Like there's just very laid back, and I'm very much like go, 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 like, so that was definitely hard to get used to, but yeah.
San Diego is beautiful. And the temperature is always perfect. I'm like, how did you do that? It's like they have a bubble that no one can see. I'm like, how are you making this beautiful weather and temperature at all times here? Yep. Like you guys have got some computer programming that we need elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely miss being in that part of the country sometimes. So when you say outreach, what do you mean by outreach?
Oh man, it's everything. It's crazy. So like the main focus of my outreach now is my superhero science, but it took a little while to get there. So I basically just went out and was doing STEM and was trying to talk to more little girls about getting into engineering and telling them, we can be in engineering. We can help each other. We can be equal to guys. Like you can build anything you want to build. Like, let's do this together. My big takeaway for all kids is, where your story began doesn't define where it ends. You do. And that persistence is what pays off, because just like those, the majority that come here and only spend 2 or 3 years that don't realize it takes decades, just sticking around for year 4, 5, 6 gets you further, and if you just keep that persistence and tenacity and play, you'll get there. But we don't teach young girls to break things, get dirty, fail. Like we for some reason program them that they have to be perfect, like in all ways, like, I don't know. And this may be like an overshare. I don't know, but like, I grew up in a world where you weren't allowed to have bodily functions outside of your private home as a girl versus like boys can go into the bathroom and do whatever they need to do. And they get high fives about the noise and all of these things, and it's like in the debutante South, you do that in a bathroom, you get ridiculed when you walk out, so it's like, we don't teach our girls to just be who they are. We teach them they have to be programmed into this box. They have to be prim, proper. They have to be accepting of everything, accommodating of everything. They need to be people pleasers. And so part of what I do is try to teach them, like, it's okay to fail, because in science and engineering, if you're not failing, you're not innovating.
Right.
You know, and I jokingly tell kids that that's why robots are going to take over, because AI is completely iterating nonstop and breaking everything that it can to figure out the best way to do it. And if we don't stop being afraid to fail, we're going to literally get taken over by robots. So it's like everything from like, I do keynotes at kids events. I host Invent It, Build It Day for Society of Women Engineers each year, where I lead a build with 300 little girls. I have a science outreach comic with my compatriot, Dr. Tracy Finara. And it basically, in each issue, we uplift a real living scientist and we tackle a real world problem using real science and tech. Of course, our nanoparticles karate chop, because it's a comic, but they still work in the way that, you know, that nanoparticles should. And so like we just did our very first week-long overnight STEM camp in collaboration with Mission Tampa Bay last week. And it was amazing. You know, we had 40 young girls and we were teaching them how to solve all the problems in Tampa Bay, which have taken researchers, you know, decades to figure out. And it, you know, it kind of fluctuates. Like I brought superhero science there. So the girls were throwing fireballs all week, replicating Phoenix's powers. We had giant elephant toothpaste exploding to show them She-Hulk. You know, of course, all my superheroes that I pick are female and STEM related. So there's like an underlying tone that the girls don't always notice. But it's expanded from there. Like I do talks at New York Comic-Con, at San Diego Comic-Con. We did the science of Skywalker for sci-fi at the last New York Comic-Con. That was an in-person thing. We did, you know, we do science of Westworld, science of Game of Thrones, all of these. But it's always centered around getting more people excited about engineering and science. And so like, it's one of those things that superhero science works so well, because if you go to a little kid and you say, here's Einstein, he's a scientist, isn't that cool? They might say, oh, he's got cool hair, you know, but if you go to the same little kid and you say, here's the Hulk. Did you know that the Hulk is Dr. Bruce Banner, and Dr. Bruce Banner has, you know, 6 or 7 PhDs and they're in all of these areas. Isn't science cool? They're like, yeah, science is so cool. And then you come to where they're at, you know, and that's the biggest thing for my outreach. It varies based on the audience. Like if they're kids that are really into hockey, I'm going to do hockey science. If they're kids that are really into superheroes, I'm going to do superhero science. If they're kids that are really into makeup, I'm going to talk about, you know, cosmetics and formulation engineers and packaging engineers. And it's something that I feel like that versatility and adaptability helps inspire more kids than if I was like, no, I'm only ever going to talk about superheroes. You know, like I want to always talk about superheroes. I mean, I'm literally wearing Fight Like a Girl with Princess Leia on it. But I also feel like, you know, you inspire more kids if you come to where they're at, kind of thing. So it's everywhere. It's comics, it's YouTube videos, it's in person, it's keynotes, it's panels, it's whatever people want, as long as I can talk to the kiddos and get them excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you said that, like, about the girls being indoctrinated. So, you know, my youngest is a girl, and my wife and I are both tomboys. There's not like a girly girl bone in our bodies. And we have a daughter who is princess everything, pink everything, makeup everything. And it's like we've actually gone out of our way to try to, like, you know, degenderize things. And yet she still comes home and we'll be like, we'll laugh and giggle about, like, oh, there's a boy in pink and he's wearing girl colors. And we're just like, where do you come up with these things? Like, it's not from our house. So it's like a whole societal thing, which is like a very uphill battle to fight.
It really is one of those things too, that it's like, no matter, like I said, like my dad never said that building in a shop was supposed to be a boy thing. But the minute I got into my community with my short hair and talking about building and trying to like connect, like I was trying to talk to the debutante girls about building, and that went over like a fart in church, right? So then I'm trying to talk to the boys about building because they like building. And then, you know, I'm getting cornered by groups of boys being like, stop trying to be a boy, stop, you know, and it's like, it's that part of it that is hard, right? Because the households that the other kids are coming from have a bias, and they're seeing everything gendered, and they're not making it so that kids can be who they are. I will say today is so much better. I mean, growing up in a military town, like you had to be a certain way, right? So the boys I think they were a lot more accepting of us as girls being tomboys from a parent standpoint as military than they would have been for like a feminine boy, which is sad because boys need to be able to be emotionally intelligent. Believe me, as other humans that are connected with them, we would like them to be emotionally intelligent, right? But it's something that for some reason, we're not good as a society about letting them be who they are. And I wouldn't say that any other nation is better at it. I think it's something that across the board as humans, we need to become more accepting of. And it's very interesting because other cultures there are some cultures that are much more accepting, like the Native American culture, for instance, like non-binary was never a thing for them. It was always just I think it's a walk of two souls.
Yeah, two spirits.
Everything. Yeah, the two spirits. Yeah. So like it's something that I just absolutely love as someone that's, gender fluid. Like I think that being able to be accepted for who you are and not have to be like, for the longest time when I was first figuring out how to, I guess, explain who I am, if that makes sense. The easiest way to say it would be like, when I'm in a shop and I'm building, I am fully in my masculine side. I do not see any, like, there's not going to be the hottest guy in the world could walk in and I'm not even going to notice. Like, but when I am like, if I want to go out and I want to go out with my girls, then I'll like, I do a whole different thing. And then I'm in my feminine side. Or if I'm going out with a different group, I may stay in my masculine side. It all just depends on what I'm doing in the moment. Like it is a very fluid thing for me. And so when I was talking with another S.T.E.M mentor that I came and I talked to her group of kids and she started explaining that to me, I was like, this is like, yes, I get it now. This is exactly, but it's something that when you don't know, I grew up in a community where you weren't even allowed, it was only allowed to be boy, girl, like there wasn't even allowed to be multiracial interactions in the community I grew up. That's how closed-minded it was, which I don't miss about the Southeast. Like you just can't be who you are in that community. And that's why so many people left it, and that's sad because it's a beautiful area. It's a beautiful town, but I think that's a societal push. And that's something that the generations of people that have lived there for now 4 to 5 generations, they're not going to change. Nope. So those kids in that area may never get to see the more accepting side of society until they leave. And that to me is the saddest part about going back to my hometown, is seeing that them stuck in this time warp of so long ago,
Yeah, I definitely get that, like 5,000%. I will say the area I live in Iowa is it's a university town, so that's part of it too, but it's very, very open-minded, in general. And when we were moving back to Iowa, that was the conversation we had to have of like, okay, these are the parts of Iowa we have lived in, and now we have like, well, at that point we had one kid and we plan to have more, and I was like, we have to go where, like, for one, our kids can go to a school and not be the only kids who have 2 moms. Like, I refuse to let them go to a school where they're the only kid with 2 moms. And an open space too for them, just so they can be whoever they end up growing into being. So that's really nice. But it's like, there are parts and pockets. It's like, you have to do a lot of thinking, intentionality about where you move, especially like when you have kids. Like you want a certain picture for them. You have to do some intentional planning out. It's not just like, oh, it'll be okay wherever we go. Unfortunately, that's not always the case.
I mean, I would say it's weird because, we moved to LA and we're like, everyone's gonna be open-minded. And my partner and I had a lot of problems in South Carolina because they're Indian. And so it was very like, we were constantly being accosted at restaurants, anywhere else, because we were in a very small town there as well. And so we were not used to that because we had started dating in Raleigh, which is the capital of North Carolina. It's got tons of schools. No one even blinked an eye, And so when we got there, we started seeing that we're like, okay, this is not where we would ever raise a family. This is not where we would stay. And so when we got to LA, we're like, oh, everyone's open-minded. It's so great. The foodie scene is amazing. But there's pockets here.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, and it came out in full like scope for everyone to see this past year with all of the movements that were happening. It became very obvious where those pockets were. And so I had like a map, and I'm like, okay, not gonna live here, not gonna live here, not, like
right.
So it's very, like you said, it's very interesting. You have to be intentional about where you live and what you're around. And sometimes, like, I'll try to live in an area just to swing the vote. I'm like, oh, this is I'm just going to come over here so that when I politically get to can swing it a bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Because every vote counts.
That's right. All right. So I have to ask, okay, you said, you went into bioengineering, but when did the tinkering come back?
Yeah. So what's cool so it's biomolecular and chemical engineering, but because it's the engineering side of it, I'm actually designing like the pipes that the chemistries and biologics are going through. But I have enough of an understanding to work for like, I didn't, but I could have worked for like an oil company designing their processing. And so a lot more of that engineering it's about heat transfer and loss of like mobility and heat through the pipes, and where you're going to get weird little eddies that form and junk, especially in a vaccines facility, if you're getting bacteria, and that's a really bad thing.
Yep.
Especially for injectables. So the tinkering came back full-fledged once I got to college. So but not until I transferred. So my junior year, what ended up happening was, so like I said, I was living in my car to pay for school, doing the equation of like, how much does gum cost versus food? Gum suppresses eating, like looking at all the biological ways to make it so my body wasn't hungry. And so I like transfer up, and I'm like, there's no way, like, I can't afford this. I even living in my car, I can't afford to figure this out. And so luckily I had an amazing admin for my program, and she hooked me up with an undergrad research job. And so my first job was redesigning and rebuilding their biodiesel facility, because we would get all these different waste stocks and have to make biodiesel for the school's buses. And so immediately, I showed up, and it was great. The guy was like, he had to be like 6'5", big burly dude. He's rocking the Carhartt, just real amazing, all American, like farm generated guy. And his whole thing was to make sure the pilot plant, like, we didn't blow it up and ruin his farm, right? And he's like, well, I don't know that you're gonna know how to do this. Do you know what a wrench is? And I just kind of looked at him and smiled. I said, just wait. Don't worry. Just trust me on this. And like within weeks, like he was like walking in and just like laughing, because I'd be like fully in the tank, like wrenching on stuff. And it was one of those things that like, it all just kind of, everything that I had hid fell away and or everything that I had, like, I guess masked, the mask fell away, and I got to embrace who I was. And like, it was amazing. Like Raleigh was so liberating for me. Like I got to re-embrace my tinkering. I got to like start exploring the parts of me that I had to hide. Like, it was just this beautiful adventure. And I will say though, I never knew it was making. I didn't know it was called making. I just got exposed to the maker side of things when I was doing Mythbusters Jr. And so the kids, were like, oh, you're going to go to Maker Fair. And I was like, what's a Maker Fair? And so they explained to me like what making is, what the Maker Fair is. And since then, I've like full-fledged jumped into the side and, everything that is maker. But it is kind of funny to talk to other females and find out when they first heard the term making. And for most of them, it was later in life. So I think it might be a marketing term. Like it might've been one of those SEO things. Because I think up until then we were all just tinkerers or, or builders or engineers or whatever we were. But I like it. I like the term making. I've embraced it for my show. So I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely more all encompassing, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, I'm a woodworker, and I generally would tend to call myself a woodworker, but then I'm like, but I don't just do wood. I do like other things too. And the maker community to me is kind of scrappy, which is what I like about it. And not necessarily pretentious, not focused on like what degree do you come to this with, and like all of that stuff. So I like that about being a maker. Hey, Pod Squad. So one of this week's sponsors is me, your host, Katie Freeman, and I am here to let you know about my very first self-paced virtual class that I have coming up called Wood Stain Rockstar, where I'm going to help you understand how you can use general household products and natural stuff to make bright, bold, beautiful color to apply to your woodworking projects. So if you've been following me for a while at Freeman Furnishings on Instagram, you see that I really like to add a punch of color. And so I am excited to bring this class to you so that you can learn how to do that as well. If you want to get signed up for this class right now, I have a wait list open. The class will be coming very shortly. So to sign up on that wait list, go ahead, follow me on Instagram at Freeman Furnishings. Hit the link in the bio and you will find right there, it says Woodstain Rockstar waitlist. Get on that list. You'll be the first to get the link when it goes live for the class, and you'll get it at the very low introductory price. So please head on over and check that out, and let's head back on in to the podcast episode.
I love that exact part of being, being in this community. Everyone is so kind of accepting. They're like, what do you do? And they're all just so curious. That curiosity and that kid love of making is there with everyone. And it's like, they're like, oh, if you're doing wood, I do epoxies. You should also, and you learn all of these really neat ways to like symbiotically bring it all together. And as someone that cosplays and steelworks, and I'm learning woodworking, I learned how to turn. I kept calling it spinning, which I got an award at the end of that convention for being the spinniest, which obviously was them making fun of me. Yes. But to be fair, it was a metal conference, and I spent the entire time in the wood shop because I was like, I already know metal. I don't need to go over there. But it's one of those things that, I think the maker community is so scrappy because they were born from the hacker community, right? Mm-hmm. And then it was like, okay, what kind of building can we start hacking together? And it's like, well, I code and I do electronics and I do this. And they just all started coming together in this like monstrous Frankenstein, beautiful thing, And so I just explained to my dad, who was born in 1949, that he's a maker. And he's like, no, I just work with my hands. I'm like, yeah, that's what a maker is. But the one thing that you said it perfectly. There's no bias about what background you come into it with. It doesn't matter if you were an apprentice for decades or you're just someone that's learned off of YouTube or you went to school for it. So one of the biggest things I kept having, because I've moved into keynoting in this area, is I kept having parents that would come up to me and be like, I can't get my kid to pay attention in science and math. And all they care about is being in the shop. And how are they going to ever go to college? And it really bothers me because as someone that became an engineer and quickly had to move away from being able to use my hands in that degree, I wish I had known and had available to me the apprenticeship model, because I had to leave my full-time career to get back to what I love, which is using my hands and seeing things be built and going from an idea on a napkin to being a tangible, beautiful thing in front of me. And I oftentimes look at the parents, and I had one parent that I just very directly said, I was like, you're not going to like what I'm about to say to your kid. And I turned to the son and I said, what is it that you like to do in the shop? And he started talking to me about machining. And I was like, dude, find a machinist program, find someone to apprentice under. You will make tenfold what I make as an engineer machining. And I turned to the dad. I was like, you don't understand. Like, aerospace is in desperate need of welders, machinists, people that know these careers, and they can make so much money. So that's part of the reason that I wanted to make Maker Science as a show, because we are taking these beautiful, artisanal learned skills that have years of just trying it and failing and learning this is the better way to do it. And we're combining it with, by the way, there is science behind this, because, I don't like this idea that someone that welds is just this big burly guy that doesn't think, because if you go to a Navy shipyard, Those guys have their welds x-rayed on a daily basis. They don't know when someone's going to come and spot x-ray. So they know metallurgy better than I have ever known it. And I had to sit through material science classes about this topic, you know?
Right.
And it's something that I just really hope that people start to realize that people that work with their hands also work with their minds, and start to disconnect that. Because again, I think it's another hang up that as a society we've just had ingrained, that the people that aren't as smart go to a tech school, and the people that are, no, it's like, no, like I went to a tech school because it's cheap and it's the smart way to spend 2 years of investments. You know, the books are cheaper, the classes are cheaper, the time is the same. So why not do it at literally a 100th of the cost? You know, like I love that about the maker community, because it's everyone, and you learn so much. I love to just go and like pop group to group and listen, and I'm just like, oh, I'm learning so much, and like share too, but like also just be a little sponge absorbing all these beautiful skills these people have, and everyone's passionate. That's the other thing about the maker community. No one's doing it because they have to. They're all doing it because they love it, and when someone's doing something they're passionate about, there's just something about that energy that's like,
that's the I haven't been to a maker fair yet, but I've been to the conference Workbench Con, and I've gone. This next February will be my 4th time there, and
they're the same time then. I want to say I went in 2019.
Oh yeah, I would have been. Yeah.
I was literally incognito, like just checking, because I wanted to go, because I was like, what's this YouTube thing about? And I wanted to like learn about that. So I was just like very hidden with hats on, like taking notes on everything. And I've met some of my best friends at that conference. Like that was such a well, like orchestrated conference. Audio, they need to work on the whole audio thing. You can never hear what people are saying.
No, never. I
think they rehire the same bad audio people every year, and you're like, why are we not?
I know.
But the programming is great. The people are amazing. Like, and I have never been to a maker fair. I learned about it the year that they shut down. So everything I've done is like Spring Make, which was like Lincoln Electric did the metal one, Workbench Con, Makers Camp in the Catskills. I was going to say Makers Summer Camp, but that's a different thing. Summer School, but that's a different thing. But Makers Camp in the Catskills. If you can go. It's amazing. Plus the Catskills in the fall are just like, I was like, can I just buy a $1,000 plot of land up here and then I'll build something on it? Like I'll put an igloo or something. Like, let me just come and live here. I literally almost moved to New York in 2019 because I was like, I gotta be here all the time. Like that one's really good. I want to go to Maker Central once, you know, I was supposed to go last year, but you know, COVID. So there's so many great little events, and they're also intimate, you know, the Catskills, especially they're actually going to do that one in person this year. It is probably bar none one of my favorite ones. Like I go back to every year.
Yeah, I have not been yet. It's definitely one I've been scoping out. I think I'll probably go next year. Cause I generally do like one big maker event a year type thing, pre-COVID, of course. But I already signed up. I'm going to be doing a carving demo at Workbench Con in February next year. So I'm like, well, but I'll probably do Maker Camp then that fall. Cause it's like, I really would like to go just to get to try out. I mean, I've tried out a lot of different things, but not like really like blacksmithing. I hugely want to try that like a lot.
Oh, they do it so well too. They set up like this entire giant camp and you can just go and forge and blacksmith, and like Jimmy Dress's sister came at the end last time and was teaching jewelry making. Like it is just one of the most amazing things. Last time I was there, I went to represent the Jesse Combs Foundation, and I was selling bandanas and we were doing photos and stuff. And I didn't actually get to go and like really, but I would walk around at night and check out all the stations, and everyone was just so amped. They had axe throwing. Like it is an adventure in itself. And they have this really cool guy that comes with antique tools. And I actually I got in so much trouble with TSA with this thing. But like, look at this little tiny, it's like,
so cute.
I'm sorry. I always do visual things and
No, that's
forget
fine.
that this is
That's
an audio,
no.
an audio thing. But it's like, it basically is an old school caliper, but it looks like brass knuckles on a scan. So I of course I wanted to protect it because the glass is missing. So I put it inside of my giant cans and my headphone cans. And so of course, all TSA saw was this black box with a weird device like this and 2 circles, and in the middle, a very strongly metal component. So I'm like, oh yeah, no, that looks like a bomb. Yeah, I get with that. And the guy kept being like, what do you have in your thing? What do you have in your thing? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Cause I just bought it. Like I literally was walking from my camp to my spot and was just like, oh, I want that. That's cool. I'm going to keep, and just it like brain farted that I even bought the thing, But so there's just so much great. I can't rave enough about the makers camp. It's amazing. They've done a great job.
So we don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to ask, like you said, you were doing this acting thing on the side as like a fun like hobby, and then it's kind of become not necessarily the acting, but like being in the public eye has kind of become a big part of your life. So like, what was that journey like of going from kind of the corporate world to public eye world?
It's very different. Like I remember my first big break in the Southeast as a commercial actor was that my butt was in a Citibank commercial, and it like literally it's the back of me, but like my butt, like I always remember my butt made me famous. And it was like a global campaign for the Olympics, and it ran for like 16 weeks. And at the time I was in my engineering job and I was traveling all the time. And whenever like one of my customers, they'd be like, hey, isn't that your butt? And I'm like, yes. And the rest, my body is there too, but yes. That is my butt. Because they save money. This is so like shady. The industry saves money by not showing your face. If they don't show your face, they don't have to pay you residuals. So they literally can just pay you a day rate and run it for 16 weeks to 20 weeks, however long they want to run it. And you never see another dime. And so it's kind of a shady thing. But that commercial, especially, there were literally only 3 people whose faces you saw. Everyone else was like a passing glance for the back of them. But so I went from this thing that was like, oh, this is great. Like I got that money and I didn't really have to do much. And then it got to a point where, I did Mythbusters The Search, and I can't walk through a convention without getting stopped. Yeah. And I love it. I love talking to the fans about their favorite builds. I love talking to them about building. But there's a part of it that everything shifts, right? Especially like social media presence wise. Like I know that I want to host kids shows. So like my friends know they can never post a picture of me with a drink in my hand. I don't post photos in bikinis. Like there's just so many things that I have to think about and in a way hide again. So I guess I get to utilize that part of my past too, of learning how to kind of divide out who the public gets to see versus who I get to be, right? And there's things that I have to think about before saying. So for instance, this is the first place that I have ever like acknowledged that I am gender fluid. So, and it's because there hasn't really been a safe space to do that in before. And so that's part of the reason I was really excited when you asked me if I could be on the show, because it's something that I don't hide, but I also have to think about, like, I'm wanting little girls everywhere to know that building is cool, but I don't want them to associate it with, they have to be a certain way to build. Right. So there's this part of it that every single thing has to be looked at from every angle. With relationships, you don't publicly, because makeups and breakups and everything else are a natural part of life, but you don't want to have to explain every single one, so I've made the decision that partnerships are never online, just because my online presence is promoting and outreach and kids. So they don't need to know who I'm dating, what I'm doing in my personal life. There's also that aspect of protecting your family. So like, my parents and my siblings, they didn't sign on for this. My nieces didn't sign on for this. And so having to go back and teach them about how to make their accounts private. When the search came out, my stepmom, who's a beautiful young Thai woman, was getting accosted by fans of the show because they thought she was my hot, like, stepsister or something. And, she looks way younger than she is. She's actually not young, but she looks very young.
Right.
And so I had to like talk to her about how to do it. And it becomes a smoke and mirrors thing where I have the Facebook that is buried and hidden that no one can find, that has the people that I love and respect and never want to bring into the light unless they want to be on it. And then I have the public facing fan page and all of that. And it honestly comes down to, this big topic that we talk about all the time as a nation, consent.
Mm-hmm.
Do they consent to being put in the public eye? Like even my friends here in Hollywood, I ask them before I tag them, and I have female friends that before I didn't think about it. And just because they were in Hollywood, I was tagging them. And then they were also getting influxes of followers that I'm used to the not okay things that get said, that get sent, that are what they are, but they're not used to that. And it's not fair to put them through it, So there's that part of it. I'm okay with all of it. Like my godmom gets mad. She'll come to like, she came to North Carolina Comic-Con with me one day, and I had a gentleman come up and explain to me why my build was not correct. And she's from New York, and like, she is New York through and through. Like she's OG New York. And I was like, whoa. And I had to explain to her, like, the fan is always right. It's like the customer is always right. You have to be able to have a thick skin and let it roll. And the trolls of the internet are always going to be the trolls of the internet. And you just have to let it come and go. And I remember that being a very big discussion point for us, because she's like, you are a strong female engineer. I taught you to be a strong female and to not take guff from men. Why are you like, and I'm like, look, this is part of the job. Yeah. Like I can be right and I cannot have a job, or I can be open-minded. I can be a scientist. I can look at it from everyone's perspective. I can think about what biases they might be coming into the conversation with. And so for me, I just always let curiosity lead in that respect. And I think on social media, I think if more people would just like realize it's more about the person on the other side of the screen than this one. But that's why like protecting them from that world is so important. And it's not something I ever thought I'd have to think about, like, and there's also the part of like, if I'm on TV, does that make it so people won't take me serious as an engineer? And that's been a really big part of it. I have just recently started sharing what I'm doing on LinkedIn, because I put the show up, and I had someone that I had known as a manager for a long time come up and be like, this is going to ruin your career. Don't put this on LinkedIn. And in reality, it doesn't, right. But it was something that for a really long time, I was like, well, this is going to be a passing fancy and they're only going to have me for a season. I don't want to risk that, and there is that part of it too, that when I build, I'm representing me as a consulting design engineer too. So I have to always be cognizant. I can't just be a clown on TV and be like, this was really hard to use glue and cardboard to make a boat, because I designed a vaccines facility during a pandemic, and if I were to suddenly be like, oh, this is too hard, I would then put into question all of my consulting jobs. And that's literally how I pay my bills. Like Hollywood does not pay money, guys. Like anyone that thinks it's going to, unless you're going to become Brad Pitt, it's not going to happen. You're always going to have a day job. So I have to be very protective of my corporate job because of that as well. So, sometimes, especially in media, they misportray what a scientist and an engineer says. So I have final lock and say on everything. And I explain to them, like, this is my actual job. I'm not going to let you, like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to say that. I'm not, like kind of things. And so there's just this weird dichotomy where there's the engineer me and then there's the TV me and the actor me, because I am a union actress as well. Like if you give me anyone else's name, I'll say whatever you want. I'll do whatever like I will be a leprechaun running around trying to steal, like not let people steal my gold. I'm fine with that. But like the minute it's my name on that screen in that bottom thirds, that's when I'm like, no, like if I am playing me, me would not say that, but like if I'm playing Sharon and, we're in the 80s and I got a side pone, there's no limits.
Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodwork her on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also, great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action. So, I mean, knowing that you've had this like interaction with, I would say like kind of the more YouTube famous maker world, do you think there would have been a benefit of growing up in that space versus TV space? Because I feel like there's definitely similarities behind some of the stuff you said, but I do think there's more freedom perhaps on the YouTube side to like be yourself type thing.
Yeah. So YouTube is such an interesting thing because for me, YouTube was always just where I kept my portfolios.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still learning a lot about YouTube. I learned about YouTube from Alan Pan on Mythbusters The Search. I had never even, I looked at YouTube to like, be like, okay, I need to go change my spark plugs. And I've never done it on a Honda. Like that's what I was going to YouTube for at that point. I wish I had known about YouTube sooner. One, because all the YouTube stars made tons of money in 2020 because their industry did not close down.
Mm-hmm.
And two, it does give you a lot more freedom. I found I'm really bad at editing though, and I have to do that a lot now, and I don't like it. It's not something I enjoy. And so I don't know that I think I would have to be part of a team if I were going to do YouTube. Hollywood actually blocks. So like when I signed with Mythbusters, I had to sign that I would not have a YouTube channel aside from what I already had. And so that's an interesting like enigma in itself. But I do wish I had known about just as a whole, like the maker side of things. So I didn't know that science and maker television is reality TV. When you say reality TV to me, I think Kardashians and I want to vomit. That is all I think. And so I spent a long time as an actor being like, I want to play an engineer. I want to play a scientist. I would show up and I'd be like, I am an engineer. I'm a scientist. And they're like, no one will believe it. No one, I'm like, I've got a degree. No one will believe it, And so my very first thing I did as an engineer was I went and got LASIKs. And then when I became an actor, I went and got fake glasses because when I put them on, suddenly I might be believable, but I was just not getting the roles at all. And it was because I didn't realize that like maker TV was reality TV. And then, so I wish I had known about the making community sooner because I wouldn't have invested so much money and time and taking acting classes where I got taught to runway walk, which I'm 5 foot, that's not very useful. Like I think I invested and kind of spent a lot of time in the wrong space. And so now I talk to kids like, if they're like, oh, I want to be an actor, I'm like, well, why? And then we talk about like, okay, well, that would actually be this type of acting, or that would actually be this type of career. And so in a way it's been helpful because I run workshops with little girls, teaching them acting, once a month. So it's still something that I love and do. And I like playing make-believe. So I do enjoy that still as a creative outlet, but I don't think it ever would have been able to be a full-time job like reality TV, science TV, or YouTube could have been. So yeah, YouTube is so great. It really is. But kids need to know that if they want to be YouTube stars, they need to have the education or the experience before doing it. It is very unsafe to pretend to be a scientist. There are a lot of YouTube stars that have died. Like there was someone that literally put dry ice into a hot tub in a closed room with a bunch of YouTubers and they all died. And it's like there's a scary side of science and tech, like it's like you can look over someone's shoulder and watch a YouTube video to a point, but if you look over someone's shoulder that's welding, you're going to go blind. So like know the sign, like know the skills and sciences behind anything before you touch it. Cause YouTube stars, man, it scares me. So like I've had to like write some of them and be like, look, I know you think you just created blast shields, but those are really thin plexi, and you shot paint at it and it moved. And I've literally set off C4 and mine haven't moved. Like, please be careful what you explode in front of that, like it's just scary. Some of the stuff I'm like, that's scary.
Yeah. I get it. I mean, we have a lot of conversations around my house about YouTube, just because, I mean, kids these days watch a lot of YouTube and watch, we kind of monitor what they watch on there, but there's conversations, because it's like I have my very, very tiny little YouTube channel, and then I have my now almost 8-year-old telling me what I should put up there and what I should not put up there.
They would know though, when they're the audience. So.
I know. Well, but his thing is like, he's like, woodworking's boring. Why do you even bother putting that stuff up there?
I love woodworking channels. When the like sawdust is like in the curls, I'm like, so you just got to make sure you got the slow-mo, the buttery B-roll shots, right?
But yeah, definitely a thing. Okay, so I'm watching time, and to be respectful of your time, I want to make sure I give you a chance to let everybody know, like, where do you want them to come find you and see all the things you're up to?
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing to do would be to go to my Instagram, and it's at the real Tamara Robertson. And I have a link tree there, and it will take you to everything else. It'll take you to the new Maker Science show. It'll take you to the Seekers of Science comic book. It'll take you to my Ask Auntie series, which is where my niece sends me really weird science questions and facts, and we deep dive sloth poop and things like that. It'll just take you to everything via that link tree. And the Tinkering Bells podcast as well. I'm behind, so enjoy the first 4 podcasts and I'll catch up. The 40 kids took up my life. I think I got like 20, maybe 10 to 20 hours max of sleep that entire week. So,
I'm sure.
but I will get caught up. But yeah, it's all there on Instagram. Plus all the, the fun pictures and stuff. And I'm definitely more active there. I'm on Twitter and and Facebook and stuff. And those links are there too. But I would say Instagram is where I'm most active.
Okay. And yes, and I will be including that Linktree link for the show notes for the podcast episode. And I just want to say thanks for saying yes and coming on the podcast.
This has been amazing. And I can't wait to amplify what you were doing. I'm like, I wish I had known about your podcast when everyone was like coming up and being like, there's no girl podcast. I'm like, what? I looked, I was like, there are hundreds of episodes. There is literally a Girls Maker podcast already. Like, we are not the only one. Like,
no. Excellent.
And I love it. You have such a diverse and plethora of amazing builders to share with the world. So I definitely can't wait to start amplifying. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. So again, that was Tamara Robertson. I'll include the link on how you can follow along with her and see all of the amazing things that is going on in the, I'll just call it the world globe of Tamara, because so many things going on, so many exciting things. So include that link in the description for today's episode. You can find that on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and check out the link down below to follow along. If you enjoyed today's episode or any previous episodes, please make sure that you hit subscribe, head on over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, please share about the podcast with 2 other friends that you know aren't currently listening to the podcast, and help us reach 10,000 downloads a month, right? We're trying to hit at least 1 before the end of the year. Right now, we average about 2,500 downloads a month, and we're trying to hit that 10,000 mark. If that happens, I will make sure that we have an event with a live podcast, along with getting Ashley Minnie there to perform the intro song, Crafting Revolution, live right there. So let's hit that 10,000 download a month mark. Share with a couple of your friends. When I am not interviewing awesome guests and making 2 podcasts a week, you can find me designing and making furniture and other home decor at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings across pretty much all of the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it, I'm there. I'm active pretty much daily on Instagram and TikTok though. So if you want to see what project I have currently going on, that's the place to come find me at Freeman Furnishings on Instagram and TikTok. So go ahead and check that out. And while you're there, make sure you follow along with the podcast too at Crafting a Revolution so you can see when new episodes go up if you don't have that little bell notification on your podcast app. All right, so we're at the end of the week. I hope that you are going into a great weekend. And as always, let's go craft a revolution.
She, her, they got something they want to say. Solution for the toxic masculinity.